The first time Elias Vance realized something was wrong, it wasn't in a hospital, it was at his own dining table. The room was filled with quiet luxury, glass reflecting soft golden light, a long polished table set for two, untouched food cooling slowly. Elias sat there, watching his son from across the table, waiting for a reaction. Any reaction. "Caleb," he said softly, his voice controlled, measured. "Can you hear me?" Nothing, not even a blink. Caleb just stared at the flickering reflection of the chandelier in his glass of water, completely still, completely detached, like the world around him didn't exist. And in that moment, something inside Elias shifted, because this wasn't new. It had been like this for years. But tonight, it felt final. He leaned forward slightly, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "Caleb, look at me." Still nothing. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was heavy. It pressed into the room like something alive. And Elias, who had built empires, closed deals across continents, commanded rooms filled with the most powerful people alive, sat there, completely powerless, in front of a 9-year-old boy who didn't respond. That was the moment it hit him. Not in a doctor's office, not during a diagnosis, but right there, at his own table. His son wasn't just silent, he was unreachable, and no amount of money had changed that. Not once. Not ever. Because Elias had tried everything, and when we say everything, we mean everything. Private specialists flown in from different countries, advanced diagnostic systems, endless consultations, quiet rooms filled with confident voices that slowly turned uncertain. "It's permanent." That was the word they kept using, permanent. Elias hated that word. He rejected it, fought it, paid more to hear something else. But the answer never changed. "There's nothing more we can do." And every time he heard that, something inside him tightened. Because there had to be something. There had to be. But what no one told him, what no one even questioned, was whether they were looking at the right problem at all. And that was the part that would change everything. Because while Elias searched the world for answers, the truth was sitting much closer than he thought. Much closer. Caleb wasn't always like this. There were moments, small ones, that didn't fit the pattern, moments Elias barely noticed, a slight flinch, a delayed reaction, a subtle shift when something dropped nearby. Tiny things. Easy to ignore. Easy to dismiss. But not everyone dismissed them. Because there was someone else in that house, someone who wasn't looking through reports, or data, or expectations, someone who was just, watching. Her name was Lila, and no one paid attention to her, not really. She'd been hired quietly, almost as an afterthought. Just another addition to a large household that ran like a system, efficient, silent, structured. Lila didn't speak much, she didn't need to. She moved carefully through the house, noticing things others didn't. Patterns, shifts, small inconsistencies, and it started with something simple. Caleb touching his ear. At first it meant nothing. Children do that. But then she noticed it again. And again. Not random, not careless. It was specific, focused, and the look on his face when he did it. That wasn't nothing. That was discomfort. The kind people ignore when they already believe they understand the situation. But Lila didn't assume. She watched, carefully, quietly, and the more she watched, the more something didn't feel right, because Caleb didn't behave like someone who couldn't hear anything. There were moments, brief, almost invisible, where he reacted too precisely, too quickly. It didn't match the story everyone believed, and that's when the thought first crossed her mind. Not as a conclusion, just a question. What if this isn't what they think it is? She didn't say it out loud. She couldn't. People like her didn't question people like them. That was the unspoken rule. And the house had rules, very clear ones. You do your job. You stay within your place. You don't interfere. Especially not with the child. Especially not with something that had already been handled. But the question didn't go away. It stayed. Quiet. Persistent. Growing. Because every time Caleb pressed his ear, every time he paused just a second too long, every time he reacted in a way that didn't fit. That question got louder and louder, until ignoring it became harder than thinking about it. One evening, the house was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that makes everything feel slower. Elias wasn't home. Most of the staff had finished their routines, and Caleb was sitting alone in the living room, still, watching nothing. Lila stood at a distance, observing. There it was again. His hand moved up, pressed gently against his ear. And this time, he winced, just slightly, but enough to confirm something. This wasn't just silence, this was discomfort, and suddenly, everything shifted, because now it wasn't a mystery, it was a possibility, a dangerous one, because if she was wrong, if she misunderstood, if she stepped outside her role, the consequences wouldn't be small. She knew that. She had seen people leave this house without warning, without explanation, just gone. And yet, standing there, watching that child sit in a world that didn't respond to him, she felt something stronger than fear, responsibility, the kind that doesn't ask permission, the kind that doesn't wait. But she didn't move, not yet, because this wasn't something you act on without thinking. This wasn't something you guess. This was something that could change everything, or destroy it, and she needed to be sure. So she waited, watched, listened, not for sound, but for patterns. And what she noticed next, that was the moment everything became impossible to ignore. Because Caleb didn't just react to touch, he reacted to vibration, subtle, barely visible, but real. A glass placed too firmly on the table, a door closing softly, a step just slightly heavier than the rest. Each time, there was a flicker, a response, not random, not imagined, consistent. And that didn't make sense. Not with everything they had been told. Not with everything they believed. Which meant one thing. Something had been missed. Something important. And if that was true, then all those years, all those answers, all those conclusions might have been wrong. Completely wrong. Lila felt her heartbeat shift. Faster now, more deliberate, because now the question wasn't if, it was what. What was causing it? What were they missing? And more importantly, why hadn't anyone seen it? She took a slow step forward, then stopped, her mind racing through every possible outcome, every risk, every consequence. "This isn't your place," she whispered under her breath, but even as she said it, she didn't believe it, because something inside her had already crossed that line, and there was no going back. She looked at Caleb again, still sitting, still quiet, still lost in a world that didn't answer him. And for the first time, she made a decision, not a full one. Not yet. But enough. Enough to change what would happen next, because whether she acted or walked away, either way, something was about to break, and she knew it. The only question was, would she be the one to cause it, or the one to fix it? That night, Lila didn't sleep. Not because she couldn't, but because once you see something you can't unsee, your mind doesn't let you rest. She lay there in the small room, tucked behind the main wing of the house, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything she had noticed. The ear, the reactions, the patterns, and one thought kept returning, over and over again. What if this isn't permanent? She turned slightly, pulling the thin blanket closer as if it could quiet the noise in her head. But it didn't, because if she was right, then this wasn't just a mistake. This was something much bigger. Something that had been overlooked again and again by people who were supposed to see everything. And that didn't make sense. Unless they weren't really looking. The thought made her sit up. No, that can't be it, she whispered to herself. But the doubt had already taken root. Because how do you miss something that repeats itself? How do you ignore a pattern? How do you overlook something that's right there? Unless you're not paying attention to the right thing. Or, worse, you've already decided what the answer is. Before you even look. Lila exhaled slowly. This wasn't just about a child anymore. This was about something deeper, something uncomfortable. And the more she thought about it, the more dangerous it felt, because people don't like it when you question conclusions that have already been accepted, especially not in a house like this, especially not someone like her. By morning, she had made a decision. Not a reckless one, a careful one. She wouldn't act. Not yet. She would confirm. Because if she was going to step forward, she needed certainty. And certainty doesn't come from guessing. It comes from seeing clearly. The next few days she moved differently, still quiet, still unnoticed, but more intentional. She adjusted her routine slightly, timed her movements, watched more closely, created small moments, controlled situations. Not obvious, not suspicious, just enough to test what she believed she was seeing. And each time, the same thing happened. A soft sound, barely there. A reaction, just enough. A delay, but not absence. Caleb wasn't disconnected. He was responding, not fully, not clearly, but consistently. And that changed everything, because now it wasn't a theory, it was evidence. And evidence leads to one thing, action. But action comes with consequences. And Lila knew that better than anyone. The house wasn't just structured, it was controlled. Every decision flowed from the top. Every boundary was clear, and stepping outside of it wasn't tolerated, especially not in matters involving Caleb, because Caleb wasn't just a child, he was everything, the center of Elias's world, the one thing he couldn't fix, the one thing he couldn't control, and that made him untouchable, protected, handled only by professionals, people with credentials, people with authority, people with permission. Lila had none of those things, which meant if she was wrong, there would be no second chance. But if she was right, if she walked away, then what? She stood in the hallway one afternoon, watching Caleb sit near the large window, sunlight stretching across the floor beside him. He was tracing patterns on the glass with his finger, slow, careful, lost in it. And again, his hand moved to his ear, pressed, held, and this time, he closed his eyes, not in thought, in discomfort. That was it. That was the moment, not dramatic, not loud, but final, because now she wasn't guessing anymore. Now she knew something was wrong, and no one else was doing anything about it. Her chest tightened slightly. Not fear. Something sharper. Responsibility again. But heavier now. Because responsibility isn't just about knowing. It's about what you do next. And what came next would define everything. She took a step forward, then stopped, her mind racing ahead. What are you doing? The voice wasn't external. It was inside. Clear. Sharp. You don't do this. You don't step into things like this. She clenched her fingers slightly, but another voice pushed back. Quieter. Stronger. If no one else will, then who? She exhaled. Slow. Controlled. And then she turned away. Not because she had changed her mind, but because she needed one more thing, one last confirmation, one last moment that would remove every doubt. That moment came sooner than she expected. It happened in the kitchen, late afternoon, minimal staff. A tray slipped, not dropped, just slightly off balance. It made a small sound when it touched the counter, soft, barely noticeable. But Caleb, he turned. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. Enough to confirm it again. And this time, there was no hesitation, no doubt, no second guessing. Lila felt it settle inside her. Cold, certain. This isn't what they think it is. And once that thought locked in, everything else changed. Because now she wasn't observing anymore. Now she was involved. And involvement leads to risk. She moved carefully that evening, waiting, timing, watching the house shift into its slower rhythm. Elias had not returned yet. The upper wing was quiet. Most of the staff had finished. This was the moment. Not perfect, but possible. And sometimes, possible is all you get. She walked toward the living room, each step measured, each breath controlled, not fast, not slow, just enough to stay invisible. Caleb was there, exactly where she expected him to be. Sitting, still, unaware of everything, and yet somehow aware of more than anyone realized. She approached slowly, not from the front, from the side, non-threatening, gentle. She crouched slightly to his level, watched him for a moment, then spoke softly, not expecting a response. "I know something doesn't feel right, doesn't it?" He didn't look at her, but his hand moved again, to his ear. That was enough. She swallowed slightly, her heart steady, but heavy. "This is it," she whispered to herself, because once she crossed this line, there would be no going back. No explanation that would be enough. No justification that would protect her. Only results. Or consequences. And sometimes, those two look the same, until it's too late. She reached out slowly, not touching yet, just close enough to feel the moment. Everything around her felt quieter, slower, like the house itself was holding its breath, because something was about to change, something that had stayed the same for too long, and whether it ended in relief or collapse would depend on what happened next. She hesitated, just for a second, not out of fear, out of awareness, because this wasn't just a decision, it was a point of no return. Then she moved, and in that movement, everything shifted. Her fingers stopped just short of his ear, not touching yet, just there, hovering, because in that final second, something inside her asked one last question. What if you're wrong? It wasn't fear, it was weight, the kind that comes when you know the next move can't be undone. Caleb didn't move, didn't pull away, didn't react, but his breathing shifted slightly, subtle, almost invisible, as if he knew something was about to happen, and that was enough. Lila exhaled slowly, then gently, carefully. She touched his ear, not forcefully, not suddenly, just enough to feel, and immediately, something was there, not imagined, not uncertain, real, deep inside, something that didn't belong. Her heartbeat changed. Faster now, more focused, because this wasn't a possibility anymore. This was confirmation, and confirmation leads to one thing, action, but action requires precision, and precision, in a moment like this, is everything. She leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay. I'm right here." Not because she expected him to hear her, but because presence matters, even in silence. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, not rushing, not forcing, every movement deliberate, measured, controlled, and then she paused, because this wasn't simple. Whatever was there had been there for a long time, long enough to become part of the problem, long enough to be missed, again and again. Her mind sharpened. No distractions, no hesitation, just focus, because one mistake here would change everything. She adjusted slightly, angle, pressure, position, and then a small shift, barely noticeable, but enough. Her breath caught. "This is it." She steadied her hand, and gently, very gently, she removed it. A small obstruction, dark, compact, out of place, and for a second, nothing happened. Silence, complete, unbroken, the kind of silence that feels like it stretches forever. Then, Caleb blinked. Once, twice. His head tilted slightly. Confusion, not fear, not shock, just something new, something unfamiliar. And then, he turned, not randomly, not slowly, but directly toward her. Lila froze, because this had never happened before. His eyes locked onto her face, focused, present, aware, and in that moment, everything stopped, because this wasn't just a reaction, this was connection, real, immediate, unmistakable. Her voice came out softer than she expected. "Caleb." And then, it happened. Not loud, not dramatic, but powerful in a way nothing else had been. His lips moved, slow, uncertain, like he was searching for something he had never used before. And then, "Dad?" The word barely formed, rough, unsteady, but clear, clear enough. Lila felt something break inside her chest. Not pain. Release. But the moment didn't last, because reality doesn't pause for emotion, and the sound of the front door opening, that brought everything crashing back. Elias. He stepped in quickly, his presence filling the space instantly, sharp, controlled, alert. He wasn't expecting this, not the positioning, not the closeness, not the shift. His eyes locked onto the scene. Lila crouched beside Caleb. Caleb turned toward her, something in his expression different. And then, "What's going on?" The question wasn't calm, it was immediate, demanding. Lila stood slowly, her mind already moving ahead. She stopped. Because how do you explain something like this? In one sentence. You don't. You can't. Elias took a step forward, his gaze sharp, scanning everything. What did you do? There it was. Not curiosity, not hope, suspicion. Because from where he stood, this didn't look like help. It looked like interference, and interference, in his world, wasn't allowed. I saw something, Lila started, her voice steady but quiet. You saw something? He cut in sharply, his tone dropped. Controlled. Dangerous. You're not a specialist. Not a question. A statement. A boundary. I know, she said. Then why would you? I had to, she interrupted, soft but firm. And that changed the air in the room, because no one interrupted Elias Vance, no one. His jaw tightened slightly, not out of anger, out of control, maintained, measured, but shifting. You had to, he repeated slowly, as if testing the weight of those words before he could continue. Caleb moved, not randomly, not subtly. He stepped forward, toward Elias, and that alone was enough to stop everything, because Caleb didn't move like that. He didn't initiate. He didn't respond. He didn't engage. But now he was walking, purposefully, and Elias noticed. Of course he did. His focus snapped instantly. Caleb, his voice changed, softer now, uncertain, like something inside him wasn't ready to believe what he was seeing. Caleb looked up at him, eyes steady, present, and then, Dad, clearer this time, not perfect, not practiced, but undeniable. And Elias, he didn't move, didn't speak, didn't breathe, because everything he believed, everything he had been told, everything he had accepted, collapsed in that single moment. And for the first time in years, he didn't have control. Because this didn't make sense, not logically, not medically, not structurally. And when something doesn't make sense, people react, not always with understanding, but with defense. His gaze snapped back to Lila, sharp again, focused. What did you do? This time, louder, not anger, not yet, but rising. Because something was wrong, something didn't align, and his mind, it was trying to protect itself from the possibility that everything he trusted might have been wrong. I removed something from his ear, Lila said. No hesitation, no softening, just truth. And that truth, it landed heavily, because now there was no ambiguity, no confusion, just a clear line, crossed. Elias's expression shifted, not explosive, not chaotic, but tight, controlled, dangerously contained. You did what? The room felt smaller, the air heavier, because now this wasn't just unexpected, it was serious. You don't understand, she began. No, he cut in again. His voice lower now, quieter, which made it worse. I don't think you understand. And that was the moment tension peaked, because from his perspective, this wasn't a miracle. This was risk, uncontrolled, unapproved, and potentially irreversible. And people like Elias, they don't accept risk they didn't choose. But behind him, Caleb was still standing, still present, still aware. And that was something Elias couldn't ignore, even if he tried, even if he wanted to. Because no matter what he believed, no matter what he feared, the truth was standing right there, looking at him, waiting, and whether he accepted it or fought it would decide what happened next. Elias didn't speak immediately, not because he had nothing to say, but because for the first time in a very long time, he didn't know what was true anymore. His eyes moved slowly from Lila, back to Caleb, and Caleb was still there, still looking at him, still present, not drifting, not disconnected, present. That alone was enough to fracture everything Elias believed, because this wasn't supposed to be possible. Not after all the reports, not after all the conclusions, not after every expert had said the same thing. Nothing can be done. And yet, something had been done, right in front of him, without permission, without approval, without the systems he trusted, and it worked. That was the part his mind couldn't settle, not yet. "Say it again," Elias said quietly, not commanding, not sharp, just unsure. Caleb blinked once, his small fingers curled slightly at his side. Then he looked up again. Dad. Clearer now, stronger. And that was it. That was the moment everything inside Elias broke. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. Because that single word carried 8 years of silence. 8 years of trying. 8 years of being told to accept something he never wanted to accept. And now, it was gone. Just like that. Not by a system, not by the people he trusted, but by someone he hadn't even considered. His breath shifted. Uneven now, uncontrolled. And for the first time, Elias Vance didn't look powerful. He looked human, confused, overwhelmed, and deeply, deeply shaken. His gaze dropped slightly, then rose again, slowly, back to Lila. And this time, it wasn't sharp, it wasn't defensive, it was searching. Because now the question had changed. It was no longer, "What did you do?" It was, "How did this happen?" What was in his ear, he asked, quieter now. Lila didn't move, didn't soften. She simply answered. There was an obstruction, deep inside. It didn't belong there. Elias's jaw tightened slightly, not in anger, in realization. Because now something else was surfacing. A memory. Fragments of past consultations, scans, reports, moments where something had almost been mentioned, but never fully explored. He turned away slightly, his mind connecting pieces he had never thought to question. They checked everything, he said under his breath, more to himself than to her. They said they checked everything. Lila didn't respond immediately because this wasn't her moment to speak. This was his moment to understand. And understanding. It doesn't come all at once. It comes in layers, slow, uncomfortable, unavoidable. They didn't look close enough, she said finally. Not accusing, not emotional, just honest. And that honesty, it landed heavier than anything else, because it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't exaggerated. It was simple, and simple truths are the hardest to ignore. Elias ran a hand slowly across his face, his control slipping, not outwardly, but internally, because now another thought had entered his mind, one he didn't want, one he couldn't ignore. What if they saw it and didn't act? The idea settled in quietly, dangerously, because if that was true, then everything he trusted, everything he paid for, everything he believed in, was flawed, not completely, but enough. Enough to cost him years. Years his son spent in silence, years that could have been different. His chest tightened slightly, not from anger, from weight, because this wasn't just about what happened, it was about what didn't. And sometimes, that hurts more. He turned back toward Lila, and this time, there was no defense in his eyes, no authority, no distance, just clarity. You saw something everyone else missed. It wasn't a question, it was acknowledgement. Lila nodded slightly. I paid attention, she said, and that was it. No long explanation, no justification, just that. And somehow, that made it even more powerful, because in a world filled with systems, status, and structure, the thing that changed everything was attention. Real attention. Elias exhaled slowly. Then something unexpected happened. He stepped forward, not toward Caleb, toward Lila. And, for a second, the room felt suspended again, because this was another moment, another shift, one that could go either way. But this time, it didn't. I was wrong, he said, quiet, clear, undeniable, and those words, they carried more weight than anything else he had said, because people like Elias, they don't say that easily, they don't say that often, but when they do, it means something has truly changed. I trusted the system more than I trusted what was right in front of me. His voice tightened slightly at the end. Not weakness, truth. And truth isn't always steady. Lila didn't respond. She didn't need to, because this wasn't about her anymore. It was about what came next. Elias turned back to Caleb, slowly, carefully, like he was approaching something fragile, something new. "Can you hear me?" he asked, not out of habit this time, but hope. Caleb nodded, a small movement, but enough to confirm it again. Elias knelt down slightly, bringing himself to his son's level, not above, not distant, equal. And for the first time in years, they weren't separated by silence. "Say something," Elias said softly. Caleb hesitated, not because he couldn't, because it was new, because words were unfamiliar. Then, "I can hear you." Simple, unpolished, but real, and that was all it took. Elias pulled him into an embrace, tight, uncontrolled, not measured, not composed, just real. And for a moment, nothing else mattered, not the past, not the system, not the mistakes, just that connection, that sound, that moment. And if you're still watching this right now, pause for a second. Because what just happened here, it's not just a story, it's a reminder. Sometimes, the biggest changes in life don't come from power, they come from people who care enough to look closer. If that hit you, take 1 second, like the video, because stories like this, they deserve to be seen. The room slowly settled, the tension replaced with something lighter, not perfect, but real. Elias stood up again, but he didn't return to who he was before. Something had shifted, fundamentally, because once you see something clearly, you can't go back to how you saw it before. He looked at Lila again, and this time, there was something new in his expression. Respect, not based on position, not based on status, but based on truth. "You didn't just help him," he said. "You changed everything." Lila shook her head slightly. "No, I just noticed." And that line, that simple line, that's where the real meaning lives. Because the world isn't always changed by the loudest people or the most powerful ones. Sometimes, it's changed by the ones who pay attention, really pay attention. Caleb stepped slightly forward, looking between them, then toward Lila. "Thank you," he said, still adjusting, still learning, but sincere. And she smiled, small, quiet, but full, because she didn't need recognition, she didn't need validation. She just needed to know that she didn't ignore what mattered, and that made all the difference. The house felt different now, not because it changed physically, but because the silence was gone, replaced, not completely, not perfectly, but enough to start again. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Not everything broken is permanent. Not every answer is final. And not everyone who sees the truth has permission to act on it. But the ones who do anyway, they're the ones who change lives. So here's the question, and think about this carefully. What are you ignoring? That might matter more than you think. And if you ever find something like that, will you walk away, or will you do something about it? Comment your answer, because I want to know, would you take that risk? And if this story stayed with you, subscribe, because the next one might change how you see things too.